talking about word form. Word form is, well, it's a verbal way of saying mathematical sentences, okay? So your goal for today is I can write expressions verbally. Okay, so to start off, we're going to move some of these words around. In a minute, we're going to look at sentences that are written all in words, and we're going to have to make math sentences out of them. But it's important that we know some of the basic vocabulary. So I have a bunch of vocabulary words over here. We're only going to mess around with about half of them, and we're going to put them either in the addition area, the division area, the multiplication area, or the subtraction area, or in this equals area. Okay, so let's take a more obvious one. So here we have the word sum. What does sum mean? Well, if you said addition, you're right. So sum is adding two numbers together and getting the answer. Okay, what about the word ratio? Think about when we wrote ratios, did we have plus signs, minus signs? Did we have multiplication signs, division signs, equal signs? So it's actually in the division area because we used a lot of fraction bars with ratios, which is a lot of division. Okay, we have the word decreased over here. So decreased means subtraction because we're taking things away. A more obvious one would be times. So times is going to tell us that we're doing multiplication. Here we have the word is. So is going to tell us that something is equal. We have quotient of. So quotient, that's the answer to a division problem. We have minus. Minus is a pretty easy one. That's going to be over here in subtraction. We have increased. That means we're going to make it more. That usually means addition. We have product of. The word product means the answer to a multiplication problem. Okay. And so there's a lot more over here. We have combined, sold for, gives, per, was, more than, are, less, percent, out of. And so we can really classify these into all sorts of different groups. But I want to go ahead and get started with some examples. So this is word form. When I tell you 5 more than a number, I need you to take that and write it in numbers and variables. Okay? So I'm going to show you the easiest way to do that. So as you read it, I'm going to go ahead and annotate it, okay? So 5 more than a number. So when I see 5, I need to think the number 5. So I write 500. More than. Well, what operation is that? Well, that's plus, okay? A number. So when you see a number, that means a variable. And so you really get to pick any letter you want unless it tells you what letter to use. And I always like to use X. So, how do we write this out? Well, if we annotate it, it makes it easy. 5 plus X. Let's try another one. The product, so product is the answer to a multiplication problem, so that's times, of 5 and G. So G is going to be our variable. So what does that mean? Well, I'm multiplying 5 and G. Now, there's a couple different ways you can write this. You can write 5 times G. You can write 5 times G. And you can write 5, oops, I'm sorry. You can write 5G. Now I'm going to tell you right off the bat, this guy right here is the wrong way to do it. And let me tell you why. When you use the X as a times, it looks like 5xg. It is not a good idea to do that. Chances are people won't know what you're writing, whether it's multiplication or if it's another variable. Your best bet is to use the dot or to write them next door to each other. Okay? Let's look at another example here. A number, okay, so we get to pick a variable, so I'm going to use, let's use y. Decreased by, so decreased means subtraction, 11. So I'm going to write 11. Now, when you're dealing with subtraction, you have to be very, very, very careful, because if we read this just like we read the first one, we would just say, okay, the answer is y minus 11. And it could be, but it could also be the other way around, okay? In this case, it is y minus 11. But in a little while, I'm going to show you a sentence that explains why you have to be careful with subtraction. Okay, so let's try another one. 17 less than, so that's minus, h. Oh, here's the perfect example. Okay, so I have 17 minus h. That's when I write it out. But the problem says 17 less than h. So I have h over here, and I'm taking away 17 from it. Okay? Really think about that. It's not 17 minus h, 17 being decreased by h. It's 17 less than h. So I need to take that 17 away from the h. I know it's a little tricky. It'll come with practice. Okay, let's look at the next one. The quotient, that's going to tell me division, of 20 and y. So we have the quotient of 20 and y, so we can write it 20 divided by y. If you're fancy, you can also use the fraction bar, 20 over y. All right, let's look at a few more. Oh, actually, in this case, we're going to flip it around. So this time I'm going to give you the mathematical sentence, and you're going to write the word form. Now, there are probably 100 different ways that you can write the word form for these, because in a couple slides ago when we talked about all the different ways that you can say addition and subtraction, multiplication, division, you can use all of those different ways. So your way might be different than my way, and they're both still correct. So I'm just going to give you an example, but also know that there can be other ways of writing these. So here I have q plus 5. So I'm going to say q added to 5. And it's important when you're doing word form that you write out the number. Okay, let's try another one. So we have 3 minus t here. So I'm going to say 3 decreased by t. Okay, let's try another one. This is y slash 5. So that slash is going to tell me division because it's a fraction bar. So I'm going to use the word quotient. So I'm going to say the quotient of y and 5. All right, let's try the last one. This is a 12x. So they're touching each other, which means multiplication. So I'm going to use the word product. So I'm going to have the product of 12 and x. And there you go. You did your word form. Okay, so let's flip it back around and let's try to write the mathematical sentence from the word form. Okay, we're going to start off easy and we're going to get harder. Don't get frustrated. Just know that this is something that specifically takes a lot of practice, and we're going to do a lot of practice in class. So here we go. We have a number, so I'm going to do x plus 5. All right, so your answer to this one is x plus 5. And remember, you can use a different letter if you want to use J or K or R, B, A, Z, whatever letter you want to use, unless it tells you which one to use specifically. Okay? Subtract, that means minus, y from 5. Now remember, I told you to be very careful with subtraction. So I'm subtracting y away from 5. So it's going to be 5 minus y. Okay, let's take a look at another one. 6 more than, that's plus, a number. This time I'm going to use k. All right, so 6 more than a number. So I have 6 plus k. Now with addition, you could have them in any order that you want. You could have written k plus 6, and that would be perfectly fine as well. Okay, so here we have 3 times, that's multiplication, as many as a number. So I'm going to use y. So I have 3 times y. But if you look at what I have in blue, that looks like 3xy. So you have 2 choices. You can write it 3 dot y, because that dot means times, or the best way to write it is 3y. Okay, but I will accept either of those. I will not accept 3xy. Okay, all right, let's do another one. Twice, what does twice mean? That means 2. The difference, minus, of a number, so I'm going to use, let's use b, and 7. Okay, we have something interesting here. We have 3 different numbers and letters when we usually just have 2. So it says twice, that means 2 times. Okay, because if I do something twice, what does that mean? I did it 2 times. So I'm going to put, ooh, I broke my own rule. I'm going to put the dot there. 2 times the difference of a number and 7. So here's what I want to do. I want you to ignore this twice for a minute, okay? I want to just focus on the difference of a number and 7. So the difference of a number and 7 is going to be b minus 7. Okay, that's easy enough. Now I want to do that whole thing twice. Well, if I did times 2 over here, that would be wrong, because that would be 7 times 2, not b minus 7 times 2. So how do I make sure that I'm multiplying the entire thing by 2? Well, very easy. I put parentheses around it, and I multiply times 2. That way, whatever happens in the parentheses, the whole thing is being multiplied times 2. Okay, let's try another one. So we have 54 divided by, okay, so that's division, the sum, okay, that's plus, of 9 and a number. So this time I'm going to use, I don't know, let's use z. Okay, so now I have 2 operations, and I have 3 numbers and letters. Okay, so let's read it carefully. 54 divided by the sum of 9 and a number. I want you to ignore the 54 divided by for a minute. Let's focus on the sum of 9 and a number. That's going to be 9 plus z, right? Now I want 54 divided by all of that. If I just wrote 54 divided by that, that would just be 54 divided by 9, because order of operations tells me I would do division first, okay? But that's not true, because I need it to be divided by all of this. So how do I do it? Think back to your last problem. Parentheses. 54 divided by all of that. And you hear my dog squeaking her toy in the background. Okay, let's do another one. The sum of, so that's going to be plus 29 and c minus, so that's subtraction, 22. Okay, again, we have 2 operations going on here and about 3 numbers or letters happening. So let's really break it apart. You might have to read it 5 or 6 times. The sum of 29 and c minus 22. So what's separate and on its own? Well, this minus 22 is by itself. So let's take care of the sum of 29 and c first. So that's going to be 29 plus c. Okay? So I want the sum of all of that minus 22. Well, okay, can I just do minus 22? No, I cannot, because that would be c minus 22, and that's not what I want. I want all of this minus 22. How do I do that? Parentheses. Minus 22. Okay? Let's try another one. The sum of, that's plus, 3 and the product, so product is times, of p and 7. So the sum of 3 and the product of p and 7. This is a tricky one. So this is saying it wants 3 plus the product of p and 7. Okay? So how do I do the product of p and 7? Well, remember, I can do p dot 7, or I can do 7p, because the number always goes in front of the letter. Okay? I always like this way best. So I'm going to do 3 plus 7p. And it's probably a good idea to put that in parentheses, just like that. All right? Let's try another one. 18 less than, that's minus, a number. So this time I'm going to use p. Okay, 18 less than a number. This is where you have to be careful with subtraction. I am taking 18 away from p. So it's going to be p minus 18. All right. That is the end of this lesson. We are going to do a lot of practice with this in class, but as always, you can rewind, fast forward, or pause so that you can go over the lesson again. And as always, you can ask me questions in class.